Move to the question and answer, and we're thankful that although Mr. Rodriguez Lobaina was unable to be with us here for being banned by the Cuban government, he was able to send that powerful message. Call on Mr. Ruslan Asadov. If you can just raise your hand so we see where you are in the room. From the All Youth Movement from Azerbaijan.
Do you hear me now? Hi, my name is Ruslan. I'm from Azerbaijan. Thank you so much for this fascinating speeches. I think your personalities are more fascinating than your speeches. So thank you again. And what is great that you all have in common, you believe in your cause. You believe in what you're doing, and this is really great listening to you guys. My question is about the grassroots youth movements, youth activities in Cuba. Do you have any active new generation activities in Cuba which promote democracy, human rights, and which use new social media, new tools that internet is providing right now? Thank you.
Es cierto.
Yes, sir. In Cuba, there is an independent cultural movement. It's essentially run by bloggers and independent journalists. And for a while now, they have been working and running campaigns as a network. This is a movement that really has grown to an extraordinary extent. There are really significant personalities in the blogging world. For example, Ms. Joanny Sanchez, I'm sure you've heard of her. I'm sure you've heard of Claudia Cadelo as well. And various other bloggers. The movement is growing all the time. We've labeled this a cultural movement. And really they're raising people's awareness. And step by step, they're really making progress. And I think we will see more and more people getting involved when the government allows more people to access the internet. Currently, the internet's very expensive. We won a battle to ensure that we could access the internet. It was a battle that lasted many years. But finally, Cubans were allowed to access the internet. Just as we were also allowed to access hotels. Previously, we weren't allowed to go to many large hotels in our own country. But these things were freed up a couple of years ago, and I think Cubans now are taking advantage of this right. However, this isn't enough. These are cosmetic measures that Raúl Castro's government have undertaken because they have no other way of maintaining their grip on power. The opposition movement in the island is growing and becoming more structured every day. There are youth movements. You saw Nestor Rodriguez Lobaina speaking just now. He's a leader of a youth movement. He's not so young now, but he started his activities when he was just 18. He's now been imprisoned more than 4 times during the years in which he's spent in Cuba. He hasn't been outside Cuba, in fact. Other young people have also become involved in this movement for democracy. There are other young persons movements which are parts of the political parties that exist in Cuba. For example, the Young Liberals, the Young Social Democrats. So civil society, an independent civil society, is progressively being built up. on a daily basis we receive news from Cuba. For example, these opposition activists send out messages on Twitter and Facebook. I have a website or a page on Facebook. And the Citizens Project is also on Facebook, so I'm really in contact with them. I see their news, their information, their comments, their work all the time. There is another youth movement that I will draw your attention to. This is the underground trova movement.
Hablar de una trova encabezada.
There was a movement headed by Silvio Rodriguez and Paulo Milanés. This is a newer movement. And then another kind of movement along the same lines was born. And now we have the underground movement, which is really taking over from all these old movements. For example, they're not allowed to run concerts anywhere, but these young people organize concerts and they carry out other activities, and they really bring their message across. There's Fran Delgado's involved, he's a performer. Ron Del Guia, who went back to Cuba just 2 days ago from Mexico. He was welcomed to Cuba by all the blogosphere, all young people here. They were all very enthusiastic about it because he leads a rock band as well that's very well known. I think young people are really very significantly involved, and it's very important that they should be. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 questions on Zimbabwe, and we'll go in the order they were received. I'm going to ask first. Can you hear? That's okay. I'm going to ask first Kiara Jade Barnes, and then Paul Davidson, and then Edward Mortimer. So if Kiara Jade Barnes would raise her hand, and please ask your question, and we'll ask our friend from Zimbabwe on the panel to address it. We'll take the 3 questions first. You push the button. Make sure you push the button before you speak.
Thank you very much to the panel speakers for their fascinating and important presentations. My name is Kiara Barnes, and I am a South African national who's currently studying here in Geneva. My question is, recently South African President Jacob Zuma has urged for the removal of economic sanctions against Zimbabwe. What effect do you think this will have, especially on international pressure for a more transparent Zimbabwe? Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Davidson, we'll now go to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The unity government in Zimbabwe is by many seen as a forced marriage, with senior MDC officials stating that the MDC exercises basically no control within the coalition. At the same time, the international donor community is very eager to engage. How do we avoid donor bucks going to Mugabe and Zimbabwe in this regard? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the final question on Zimbabwe will be for Edward Mortimer.
Thank you very much. My question is also about the MDC. 2 years ago, I remember at a meeting like this in Prague, a lady from the MDC telling a very similar story to what we've been hearing from Dewa Mavhinga. And now I just, while you're speaking, receive an email from her. She is the ambassador of Zimbabwe in Senegal, and she says how pleased she is to be there and promoting Zimbabwean products. What judgment should we make of this party? Have they simply become collaborators and fig leaves of the ZANU-PF dictatorship, or is it more complicated than that?
Thank you, and I think we can turn to our panelist, Mr. Dewa Mavhinga, to respond.
Okay, thank you. On the first question, I would just want to clarify first that there are no economic sanctions on Zimbabwe. And President Jacob Zuma was referring to targeted asset freezes and travel restrictions that are aimed at about 203 individuals, Mugabe's inner circle, that is President Mugabe of Zimbabwe, and about 30 parastatals, government-owned companies that were directly controlled by ZANU-PF senior officials. So this is the package that is there. The discussion around these so-called sanctions is misplaced because these measures have no effect on the people of Zimbabwe as ordinary Zimbabweans, but these are being used as a political bargaining chip by ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF is presenting them as economic sanctions when in fact they are not. They are simply asset freezes and travel restrictions. So for President Zuma, I think the focus should be on the power-sharing government implementing what they agreed to under what they call the global political agreement, implementing fundamental reforms, human rights reforms, ensuring that there is an end to impunity, bringing to book all those people responsible for violating human rights in Zimbabwe. I think that's the core focus that President Zuma should be pursuing, and not the shopping sanctions. On the question of international donors eager to re-engage with Zimbabwe and how do we avoid donor money going to ZANU-PF and Mugabe, I think this is the challenge that is presented by the power-sharing government in Zimbabwe, that there is a perception of change or a hope that is received that things could be changing for the better. But the reality is that the security apparatus and President Mugabe are firmly in control of Zimbabwe. And in terms of how to avoid money going to the wrong hands or being misused, international donor money, the proposal from the MDC, from the Finance Minister Tendai Biti, has been that his ministry should completely oversee all donor funds, and also that there should be what they called a multi-party donor trust fund, into which money would be allocated, which would be administered by the main UN agencies operating in Zimbabwe, together with the Ministry of Finance, which is controlled by the MDC. That way, they hope to minimize the opportunities for ZANU-PF to misuse money available from the international donor community. But the position really is that money should not be channeled to central government for as long as the military is in control and for as long as President Mugabe is effectively in control of the country, but should go through this multi-party donor trust fund. On the question of the MDC joining this government, whether they have become collaborators or fig leaves for ZANU-PF dictatorship, the challenge is that at the top level of leadership, the reality is that there has been some form of cohesion and collaboration to some extent, which has led to this negotiation, which is not democratic, which is not founded in democratic principles, that you go to an election, you have a credible, accountable, and free and fair election that gives you a leadership. What we have now is a negotiated settlement. But the thing and understanding among Zimbabweans is that it should be transitional. It should lead to, it should facilitate the creation of the right and enabling environment, such as coming up with the right electoral management system to lead to a new, fresh, free and fair election in which we would have a decisive winner and in which the outcome would be accepted by all the parties. But I think where the MDC is failing to deal with this issue is their inability to address the military. Because in 2008, the MDC was the decisive winner in the elections, but there was no transfer of power. So the challenge really is on how to ensure that in the event of a win of elections by the MDC, there is a peaceful transfer of power and not a repeat of 2008 where there was a bloodbath and serious violence to retain ZANU-PF in power.
Our next question is Martha Chertkow here. If you raise your hand, and go ahead. And this question is for all the panelists. And the next question Afterwards, we'll call on Gina Rhee for our North Korean human rights defender. This question is for, I think, all the panelists. Go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Martha Churko, and I'm from Montreal, Canada, and I'm here on behalf of the European Union of Jewish Students. And my question is regarding the parameters of international involvement. I can say that we all, as human rights activists, agree that there has to be some involvement on the part of the international community, but I know that I'm skeptical regarding the effectiveness of mediating with murderers and negotiating with the regimes in power. So I was wondering if you could comment on what you believe should be the parameters of international involvement, whether should we be pursuing policy of isolation or engage in pressuring, and which is most effective in your particular cases. Thank you.
Is the translation working? Yeah, Matteo, why don't you take it?
Thank you. We are in Geneva, and Geneva is one of the seats of the United Nations. And this organization was founded on some universal values that have been transformed over the time in international law, which is something that nation states have agreed for being part of the United Nations to abide. So I know that in politics there is a discussion about isolation, negotiations, which is all part of the political affairs, which is good and needs to be pursued. But we have to start from these fundamental principles that every nation, to be accepted inside international organization, have to respect it. There are rules that needs to be respected. And if we lose that, if our countries also lose that conviction that we need to ask the respect of these norms because nation states have agreed to respect them, that means that even in our own country, we are diminishing the values of democracy, of free speech, and freedom. So I think what should give us also more strength in trying to help these people is that it's the same struggle that we have to conduct, both in our own countries where we have freedom of speech and in theirs, because there is a strict connection, because when these values get diminished in their value, everybody is at risk. Nobody is really safe. So I think to start also discussing about isolation and negotiations, you have to have in mind that politicians should keep the respect of these rules as a basic fundamental premise. Then you can compromise. You can see where the direction is. You can give incentives. You can make sanctions when the behavior is not right. But I think on the basis of these principles is the only guide that can lead us in a better place than we are today in international relations.
Thank you, Matteo. Our next question is for, I think this will be our last question because of time, is Gina Rhee here? Okay, and before I ask the question, I hope the interpreters are translating into the language so our panel can answer. Please, you have the floor.
Hello, my name is Gina Rhee. I am a Korean American student at Cornell University, and I've been interested in North Korean human rights issues ever since I was little, and I just wanted to ask some insight from Mr. Donghyuk Shin. Young Korean American students like myself and other students are gaining more interest in human rights issues in North Korea, and thanks to speakers like yourself and other organizations like Link and such. And after being educated on this issue, they're gaining more interest in helping out and to promote this issue, and also be able to gain more insight and to be able to help out financially or advocate and such. But students feel often discouraged that they cannot do much financially or even have the political power to do anything. And I was just wondering if you had any insight for the students who are passionate for this cause but are unable to make a difference in this issue, and how we can help in any way.
Okay, so I will talk to you. I'm taking an example. So now I am working in an organization that is called LINK, L-I-N-K, based in the state. So members and interns of this organization are composed of principally Korean Americans. So this has been established by these Korean Americans. So if you look at the activity of this organization, it is primarily focused on helping the refugees from North Korea that are coming to the States, United States or Korea, South Korea, to bring them safely. So now I am also engaged as one of the staff of LINK. So say the United States is far away from both South Korea and North Korea. And I have been really impressed by Korean Americans and Americans who have interest in such issues far away from the state, despite the lack of information. And even though my life in North Korea has been so miserable, you know, so in retrospect, I can understand the miserability of North Korea better. So these activists of the organization are engaged very actively to promote the issues. But also the reality of these activists working for the organization is miserable because they have to use their cars and go all over the land of the state to ask for help and support. So if American citizens hear about this kind of campaign and donate $1 or $10, even though it is not so much money, this donation coming from individuals can make $1,000 and $2,000. But in reality, the amount of money that we need for saving one refugee from China, coming from China, amounts to $2,500 to save one refugee coming from North Korea through China to the States. So the staff and interns of the LINK work in a very difficult situation, sleeping in their cars and in order to save these refugees. So after saving these refugees and receiving them in the state, I have seen these staffs and interns of the organization scream with joy. It's not that they expect a huge amount of money. It only starts from $1 or $2 and $10 coming from individuals. So I think what is really important is not the money itself, but it is your heart. So what I expect is your sympathy and your support. I think this is what is the most important thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you to all the panelists, and especially also thank you to UN Watcher, the organizers of this summit, because we know that not far from here there is another summit with the governments taking place discussing about human rights, and unfortunately many of the people who will speak here will not able to speak there. So at least we hope to complement with some information something that I think is really important for the international community to hear, but so many times is forgotten. So thank you, and the panel is closed. Thank you.